The monsoons tend to be a season with a preponderance of infectious diseases. There are airborne infections such as influenza and other viral respiratory tract infections that are quite common. There are water and foodborne diseases such as typhoid, and vector or insect-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue, which tend to be quite common in the monsoons. So why does this happen? Several factors contribute to this. There are lower temperatures in the monsoons, and lower temperatures facilitate the growth and replication of viruses. Viruses tend to like this temperature. Because of the lower temperature, because of the monsoons, because of the rains, people tend to crowd and aggregate indoors, and this crowding indoors with a lack of proper ventilation can very often facilitate the spread of respiratory tract infections. Flooding leads to contamination of water sources, contamination of food sources, and consequently leads to food and waterborne diseases. If you walk through or wade through muddy waters during a flood, you can get diseases such as leptospirosis, which tend to be quite common in the monsoons as well. Cesspools of water or stagnant water, which very often happen after a heavy rain. So the rain has gone away, but it's left behind stagnant water. These cesspools often serve as breeding ground for mosquitoes. They help the multiplication of flies, etc. And this can lead to a lot of vector-borne or insect-borne diseases. Influenza has a vaccine, and I think getting vaccinated with the influenza vaccine, especially if you are a high-risk person, a person who has risk factors or are immunocompromised, is always a good idea before the monsoons. You should wear a mask when you are ill so that you protect others and you don't spread your own infection to others. If you are high risk or you are immunocompromised, it may not be a bad idea to wear a mask such as an N95 mask, especially when you are in a crowded place or when you are indoors in a crowded place with poor ventilation. I think it's important to make sure that the quality of the water and food that you have is good. So try and drink water which is filtered, especially with a UV filter. Boil water if you don't have access to a UV filter. And make sure that the food that is eaten is freshly prepared and cooked really well. I think it's important to protect oneself from mosquitoes. So if you look around the house and you have stagnant water, try and drain as much of that as possible. Also try and use a mosquito repellent when you're outdoors and you're exposed to mosquito. And within the house, do whatever you can to protect yourself from them, whether it's a net or whether it's a repellent of some kind. Wading through water, through flood waters, is dangerous and can potentially lead to leptospirosis. So if you get a fever, especially after an incident where you walk through water, do let your physician know as soon as possible. So these are some of the simple tips that would help you. Hand washing is something that we should never forget. It protects us from a lot of foodborne as well as respiratory illnesses, and I think that is of prime importance. And I think with a few practical tips, one can protect oneself to the best of your ability during the monsoons.